we go. Thursday, May 5 is the second full day of the election campaign here in Ontario. It's the On the Ledge team around the table. This is the Rit Race version of the Ontario Politics podcast. And it was actually almost to the day 4 years ago, John Wright and I kicked this whole Clydesdale wagon of fun off when we had the Ford running for his first mandate here in Ontario. It's Dave Trafford with John Wright from Maru Public Opinion. Sabrina Nanji is here from the Queen's Park Observer. And Keith Leslie visiting us here in the 6. We're all in the same time zone. Although you must feel like you're back home now, just the way the hours are working out.
Absolutely. I'm still on Atlantic time, working for me.
Yeah, and hard to keep up with the hockey games at night for you.
That is the thing. You're pushing my upper limits for the late nights.
Really. All right. So, John, 4 years ago, you and I were looking at this, and we were saying, okay, here's, Ford versus Wynne. It looked as though the writing was already on the wall that the Ford team was on the way to a big win. We didn't anticipate the huge loss that the Liberals were going to be in. So there was some shift in that campaign. You've been watching it closely. What are we likely to see in terms of, or what should we expect in terms of shift in this campaign in less than a month?
Well, I'd be watching the vote for the NDP and the Liberals to see whether one of them collapses. I mean, we have Andrea Horwath running her fourth campaign, and we recall from the last time you and I did this 4 years ago that she got pretty close. The NDP in the last couple of weeks were really charging up until, I think it was Jagmeet Singh's brother, held up a sign damning the police and a bunch of other things at a rally, and everything kind of switched over as the Tories grabbed hold of that. So I would think that that's the race really to watch. It is Ford's to lose. His numbers look really strong. And I'd look to the 905 region, as we do all the time, Dave, to see whether or not there's going to be any big change there. So that's kind of where my fix is at the beginning of the campaign.
Well, Sabrina, yesterday we were sort of positing what, the response would be around the abortion question. And, it's kind of funny how it consumes so much oxygen in talk radio and certainly in analysis in the media. But, I will say the same thing about the abortion issue vis-a-vis Roe v. Wade, as we said about the idea that Del Duca wants to ban handguns across the province. It's a completely irrelevant subject, but I think it helps the government in a strange way because it distracts from everything else. Here's a whole day chewed up talking about abortion.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, both of those are visceral issues, and we kind of have seen it all, playing out on this side. It's becoming a very localized issue, and of course, that's going to be a lot more amplified in Ontario when it's campaign season. We saw Premier Doug Ford basically forced to, defend his stance and raise this as after the Liberals and the NDP raised the specter of Sam Osterhoff, who had said a couple of years ago that he wants to make abortion unthinkable in his lifetime, and then the premier, when he was touting the 413 on his campaign launch yesterday, was basically forced to address this. And he says, the laws aren't changing in Ontario, but not all of it is in Ontario's jurisdiction. I know Keith yesterday had mentioned the safety bubble zones around clinics. I know parties, especially the more progressive parties, would like to see those expanded just so that people who need these services are protected. And also, access is abysmal in rural areas. For instance, it's not consistent across the country for abortion. And so this might be an opportunity, to look at our policies. But then at the end of the day, it's all political and it's kind of becoming a wedge issue. The premier reiterated his stance. The laws are staying the same. Sam Osterhoff is free to say what he wants. Our party's a big tent. And then, Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca was asked about funding for Catholic schools, another political hot potato in Ontario, and he's promising, that even anti-abortion activities at certain Catholic schools, they won't result in, a lack of funding, but there might be directives where the schools will, make it clear to the schools, I should say, that that's a no-no. It's not acceptable. And so I think we're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of policy in Ontario on this issue, and maybe it's a good thing to look at this, but I don't think we're going to be be done talking about it anytime soon.
Well, Keith, I don't think it moves the needle, though. I mean, let's face it. Nik Nanos came out with what's on the top of mind for Ontarians as they head for the polls. And based on the way he asked the questions, healthcare was at the top of that list. But if you take the next 3 or 4, it's all about what we talked about yesterday, affordability. And how do you actually define that? It doesn't mean I'm going to be more affordable to get to work. Am I going more affordable housing to be close to work? The price of gas, all of those things. So, I don't disagree with the narrative that Sabrina has described, in as much as that was the momentum in terms of discussion. But who, right now, put up your hand, when was the last time you had a conversation around the dinner table about whether or not the Catholic schools should be funded?
1985, I believe, was, I was on that campaign too. Of course, the reason that abortion is being used, Sabrina just nailed it, it's a wedge issue, and there's obviously perception from the Liberals and the New Democrats and even the Greens that the Progressive Conservatives are vulnerable on this because of Sam Osterhoff, because of Doug Ford, and, because of the federal Conservatives as well, who apparently are told, just stay away from Ontario for the next 4 weeks. We don't want to see you anywhere near our campaign trail, because of their fumbling of social conservative issues, including this one. So that's why it's still there. But no, does it actually move the needle? It has the potential to, because let's face it, who is obsessed with this story? The media. And what are the campaigns trying to do? Get the media's attention. So that's why everyone spent day one of the campaign commenting to some degree or another on Roe v. Wade, and forcing Doug Ford to comment on it, and forcing him to sound like Jason Kenney. The U.S. Supreme Court doesn't have any rule, and really, I know what he's saying, but now you're being paired with Jason Kenney, who's really, not a guy you want to be paired with during an election campaign. So that's why it's there. That's why they're being, tackling on this. They're going to get to the housing issue. They're going to get to the affordability stuff, but I don't know if it'll move the needle as well, because we're seeing, 2 very clear plans here from the Progressive Conservatives and then the other parties. It's Highway 413. No, it's absolutely not. The Ford won't tell us how much it's going to cost. The Liberals say it's going to cost $10 billion, which they're going to cancel that project right away and use that $10 billion in schools, to build 200 new and refurbish others. Well, schools need to be refurbished and built no matter who you are as government. So let's, take that money and, if I were the Liberals, I would emphasize more, and I guess they're going to today, the Buck a Ride plan for their transit. Because if you're going to take highways, money away from highway, put that money then into the transit. Because what's it going to cost to subsidize to $1 a ride, not just on public transit systems locally, but on the GO transit system, and apparently on Ontario Northlander, which is already the most heavily subsidized when it comes back into service, is a hugely heavily subsidized rail route. Not that it isn't necessary, but what's the cost for that? So I would suggest that they focus more on that. As I say, rebuilding schools and refurbishing, that's your job. The Liberals took a lot of heat when they closed schools, but that was done for demographic reasons. The schools were, underutilized, way underutilized. Locally, that's never a popular thing to do, but communities move on from that. So this is, again, just the job of government. I think they need to focus on more on what they can bring to the table that the PCs aren't bringing.
Yeah, just to be clear, though, that $10 billion, John, we don't have that $10 billion right now. We're going in debt for that $10 billion. It's not like you can just go into that pocket and say, hey, we're going to divide it up elsewhere. We're borrowing that money.
Yeah, but it also is spread out over a longer term. It's also the same thing we do when we put subways down in cities and things like that. It's also the case that highways have to be built in certain parts of the region, and you have to anticipate that that's going to happen. We had this discussion. I mean, the 905 continues to grow, and there's commuter traffic that goes across the top and then down into Toronto. So all of these things are helpful, I think, to their campaign plan. The question in my mind on this is whether it sets up a referendum for the region. I mean, the last thing you want is a 905 which takes 70% position against something that you're doing, or in fact 70% in favor of it. And if this is the card they're going to play, then that's going to be the issue in that region, Dave. So I'm looking to see on that particular matter whether it becomes just a referendum on the Ford government and the 413, or whether other issues play out. But if I were the Liberals, that's where I'd be headed right now. I'd be trying to divide that group of people as much as I could and do exactly as they did yesterday.
Okay, so let me take us back to our friend Nik Nanos and the numbers that he released yesterday at CTV. I might have missed it, John, but I didn't see we need more highways on his list of what's top of mind for Ontarians.
No, in fact, transit and infrastructure are right way down the list. And it actually is kind of dueling. Certain polls show that the affordability is the top issue and healthcare is second or so. So, even my own that I'm doing show that affordability of basic things like groceries is ahead of everything else. The real issue here, though, is regionally. How are you going to accumulate the votes? It may be that affordability is worth talking about because that's the thing that affects people. That's how your campaign about housing and buck a ride and everything can kind of go into. But what is a decisive ballot question? What is that thing that makes you, in a regional sense, decide that you're going to go one way versus the other? Among that, and I go back to this, every election campaign, if you have to have more than partisans voting for you. And this is the thing, Dave, in all the years that I've watched election campaigns in Ontario and the Conservatives are running an election campaign, they've got about 28% of the vote already. They need another 12 points. And that is the 12 points that comes from the 905 or from other people. And it may not be on affordability. It may be on something else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've got a few minutes here. We got a hard stop because Keith would rather sit in the dentist chair than talk to us this morning. So
I really would not.
We want to make sure he gets up to his appointment.
To John's point, though, that he just made, there was another poll this week that showed in the 905 the PCs are at something like 48%. So it would seem that the support for the highways is there in the 905. We keep talking about what a battleground 905 is. That's a number that I don't think anyone else is going to come close to in that hugely seat-rich season or region season.
Let's. One of the things that I keep hearing, there's no appetite for change. We're not really looking for change, Sabrina. We're not really worried about a shift that's going to force a government out. And I kind of stepped back from that last night as I heard all of this commentary around it, suggesting that the premier's pretty much going to sleepwalk into the premier's chair again. But if we aren't looking for change, then why is healthcare still at the top of the list of things we think need to be a priority? If we had changed it, healthcare would have been way down that list. If we had changed it, affordability and affordable housing would have been way down that list. When we ask for change, we're saying we want you to address these 3 or 5 issues, and perennially they are the same freaking issues. That's the change we want. That's really the change that Ontarians are looking for. Change the way we deliver healthcare. Change the level of service in healthcare. Change how we approach affordable housing. Isn't that the change we need?
Yeah, and I think, the pandemic kind of gives the Ford Conservatives an easy out. Like they can kind of say, it's a mulligan, the pandemic just completely threw off our plans. Remember, they were promising in 2018 to end hallway healthcare. They started this whole restructuring of, the health system and how we deliver it, making this super agency Ontario Health, that type of thing. And that kind of was all put on pause. And so I think they do have an easy out. And just anecdotally speaking, the voters that I'm talking with, they're willing to give the Ford government another chance, another kick at the can to try and do that. The line that the Liberals had 15 years and kind of left this mess. That's kind of why the pandemic was so destructive to our healthcare system. We didn't learn the lessons from SARS. All of that, I think it is working in the Ford government's favor. And people are kind of willing to say, he tried his best. And let's see where we can take this. But I think that the onus is then going to be on the opposition parties who have frankly failed to kind of get that message out in the last 2 years, about how Doug was bumbling the pandemic file. And so it's going to be up to them to remind people of all those mistakes that happened, not putting the iron ring around long-term care like Ford said he would, the COVID had ravaged long-term care, and the Ford government's plan on that front, or I should say the Conservatives' plan on that front, is just kind of to expand the system, more beds. There's incentives to boost, much needed staffing, but the unions are still upset about Bill 124 and that wage capping legislation there. So I think that you're right, that not much has changed in what we want, but people are kind of willing to let Ford have another chance because the pandemic was unprecedented, and the opposition parties have kind of failed to, really hammer the point about how much they've screwed up on that file.
Well, I guess in that respect, John, we haven't seen much change at all vis-a-vis how the political posture of any of the parties. But, let's take Sabrina's idea here and stretch it through against the backdrop of a possible minority government. I realize right now the tea leaves don't suggest that. But if we get into a circumstance where all of a sudden we begin to learn or hold to account the next government for a lack of attention to long-term care or whatever it might be, some other crisis comes up, and we can't say it won't happen. And I'm not trying to, fearmonger here, but the level of preparation that needs to go into long-term care, the autism file, all of those things that we've talked about over the last couple of years and have been highlighted by COVID. I think it's almost at any party's jeopardy not to be addressing that up front in terms of how they will deal with that in the first year of their mandate.
Well, maybe it's a matter of timing, Dave, because I think going into the election campaign, the first couple of weeks are to help define the brand based on the top issues that we've been talking about, affordability or, fixing things that were broke, all that sort of stuff, but not to put anything particularly in the window right off the bat. It's like watching a prize fight. They don't let it all go unless you're in MMA, all in the first round, and you're kicking, jabbing people and kneeling on them and all that. That's the whole name of the game. But this is kind of like sparring. They're going to try and seek out where that ground is. They're testing things. They're going to see how the opposition party responds to it. It's like the buck a ride. It's easily said. It's easily understood. It cuts through like a knife, and they're going to keep using it. And just as Keith and you said, you take that money from the 413 and you put it into other areas, which might be transit. There's a plausible scenario there. That's in the first 48 hours of this campaign. So they're jockeying around looking for each other, and I think that's kind of what you're going to see for the next few days.
Yeah, I think one of the cartoons was Del Duca, Keith, coming up with all these rhyming labels, and he figured if I can make it rhyme, that would work. So buck a ride, province-wide is one thing. But to John's analogy, rope-a-dope made boxing boring.
Well, there is that.
Right? And it just tuned everybody out. So if that's the point of a campaign now, is to tune everybody out for this first 48 hours, I'm not sure. I would be concerned.
Governments always want to have a lower key campaign because they have a tougher record to defend. Ford in particular, the long-term care we mentioned, 4,400 deaths in the first wave. They were just ignored. They were basically the investigation found that the government-appointed probe found that the long-term care homes were just ignored. Autism. There's over 50,000 families that definitely won't be voting for the Ford government to get in again. And that waiting list was 20-odd thousand when Ford took over and completely and totally messed up that file. So there are issues out there that really were handled badly by this government. The opposition parties haven't been hammering them so far on that. There's also the point about, we mentioned, that you mentioned that $10 billion or whatever the price tag of the 413 isn't actually government money at this point. Well, the Auditor General said, she said a look at the books, and they figured that the Ford Conservatives in that budget that just was presented as their campaign platform, they've got about $3.5 billion more in contingencies and reserves that anyone else had ever put aside that they could be spending on new programs. If I were them and I really wanted to address these, or if they become vulnerable on the autism file, if it actually catches on a bit during the campaign, pledge $1 billion to fix the mess they created. Admit they created a mess. They have 3 ministers in 4 years and totally screwed up that file. There's a lot for the other parties to campaign on, but when you're campaigning, you're also trying to present a positive alternative. And so to just continue in your opposition role of hammering away at what a shitty government the Fords are, or the Progressive Conservatives are, it's not going to get you elected, especially when you're now fighting against the Liberals and the NDP are just fighting each other, trying to get to first spot. But in reality, it appears, given the poll numbers right now, they're fighting for second, and the NDP is losing. So they've all got to, they have to present positive alternatives, but they also have to present a solid reason for not re-electing the Ford government.
Well, Sabrina, let's face it, the Liberals have no currency with the autism file either, and I kind of come back to, taking a page out of the Tory campaign against Del Duca. He is essentially a win-loser, so that is going to stick to him, particularly on that file.
Yeah, and I think that we're kind of hearing that from the NDP. Here are all the people Ford has left behind, and we're gonna, raise them up. But at the end of the day, it's falling flat. And I think you guys are right. Del Duca is good so far with the flashy, rhymey, catchy catchphrases. I guess if I could put it, maybe I need to hire
trying to out
someone
bumper
from
stick
his...
Doug Ford, right?
But you know what? We don't have a full platform from them. Maybe he's good at grabbing a headline of the day, but is there really a lasting impact? And the result of all this is that Ford and the Conservatives kind of have their a stronger message to people. And so I think, I think people like to vote for something or against something. And I don't think we're seeing enough from the opposition parties to actually bring people out to the polls. But maybe some of this polling, as I've said before, that suggests the Conservatives are on track to win it, that might actually galvanize some Liberal and NDP supporters to actually go out, get out the vote, knock on doors, put up lawn signs and all that. It's only day 2.
Just before we go, I want you to give us. I love the piece you did this morning in the Queen's Park Observer, and you were talking to Scott Reed about the slogans. I thought that was just bang on. I mean, there's so much work that goes into them, and clearly, in Scott's mind, none of them worked.
He shredded them.
No kidding.
Yeah. I think he likened Get It Done from the PCs to a Yellow Page ad for your basic service repair shop. The Green's pretty boring, uninspired. The Ontario you want, the leadership we need. The choice is yours from the Liberals. That's kind of like a duh statement. Like, who else would be deciding what is that choice? We don't know. And then the New Democrats, strong, ready, working for you. I think he kind of had the least criticism on that one, but it kind of sounds like an incumbent wanting re-election, and that doesn't exactly fit what they're going for, I don't think.
All right. Well, let's leave it there. That was, we're heading into day 2 on the campaign, so we'll get back at this first thing tomorrow. Keith, Leslie, John Wright, Sabrina and Angie, I'm Dave Trafford. This is The Writ Race. It's an Icon TAC production. All right, that's it for the Thursday edition of The Writ Race. And again, we'll be in both feeds, in On the Ledge, if you're a regular listener here. If you're listening on the Ledge, that's great. Otherwise, we've dropped this into the Daily Brief as well. Now, we'll probably have other things in the Daily Brief between now and June, but just thought that this was top of mind, so we'll keep you up to date. And we'll keep it going right through until June the 3rd, because we'll want to do a morning after analysis of what came out of the vote on June 2. If you've got a thought on it, feel free to share, leave us a comment. Otherwise, you can catch up to me on the Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, at Dave Trafford finds me there. All right, that'll do it. This is The Writ Race for Story Studio Network. We'll talk to you tomorrow.